Hello and welcome to the Epic Classroom Podcast. My name is Trevor Muir and I like to talk about teaching, whether it's stories and ideas from my own classrooms or lessons I've learned from other educators. I love to explore ways to help students grow and thrive and for their educators to thrive as well. And so that's what this podcast is. Whatever you teach or however you serve in schools, how can you lead a more impactful, dynamic, meaningful, and epic classroom? All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Epic Classroom Podcast. I am so excited for this episode specifically. We have another guest on. His name is Jerry Kolber, and he is the co-founder of Atomic Entertainment and co-creator and host of one of my son's favorite podcasts in the world, Who Smarted. He's also the showrunner of National Geographic's Brain Games and does a bunch of other incredible stuff that entertains and educates. And I'm so excited to have a conversation with you today, Jerry. So thanks for joining us so everybody can kind of tune into our convo.
Yeah, Trevor, thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, my son, Jack, is 10 years old. And I remember when we found your podcast for a road trip a while ago, and we saw Who Smarted. He was 9 when we found it. Any reference to farting is just absolute gold for that boy. And so Who Smarted just did it for him.
Yeah, we know our audience, man.
Yeah, you do. And I love it. And I'm so glad that we get to chat today because you do something really interesting to me. And I think good teaching does this as well. There's this blend of education and entertainment. I'm also interested in the fact that you lead Atomic Entertainment and yet it's so education focused. Can you kind of speak to that, like just the tie between entertainment and education?
Yeah. So we started Atomic Entertainment about almost 15 years ago. We had created a show for National Geographic Channel called Brain Games that was a way to teach people about neuroscience using games and fun. And the show did really well. And it was the first chance that we'd had to take our own personal love of education and science and just curiosity and marry it with all of the things that we'd learned. My business partner, Adam Davis, and I had learned along the way about making great entertainment and like hooking people into shows and getting them to like stick with the show. So we married like what we knew about entertainment with what we love about education. And Brain Games was such a success that it was like, once we had a bite of that apple, we were like, we can't go back. Like this is all we're gonna do. Like it was just, it's because to be able to have that kind of impact and be entertaining at the same time, it's just there's not a lot of companies that know how to do that. And so once we realized that was really a sweet spot for us, we just leaned hard.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like, so we just listened to the Who Smarted episode the other day about Friday the 13th and why it's not actually
Hmm.
cursed. And my son, he's
Yep.
just so into myths and curses and
Hmm.
he's just really into that right now. And so like he was so hooked because there's like this obviously silly aspect to it, but then there's real facts and there's people brought in. And I feel like that's what to me is what good teaching is. It's
Yeah.
like, all right, I got to hook you. I mean, the information's great, but if I can't make you interested in listening to it or
Yeah.
paying attention to it or engaging with it, you're not going to retain it. You're not actually going to
Yeah.
hold on to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I mean, I think we think of our of the competition for attention isn't like one thing anymore. It's everything, right?
Mm.
And so kids are so their brains are so trained to expect like, instant 45-second gratification from like online videos and just this constant flow of information. And so we're not educators. We have educators that we work with who advise us and help us with research. But we consider ourselves like education adjacent, so
Yeah.
we see our role as like, look, if we can help a teacher get kids to settle into class after transition, or help parents get a kid into bed with something educational, or make a car ride more fun and educational, so we're not on the screens and we're not going crazy, that's a win for us. And that's where we think about everything. Like we do shows for adults that kids can also enjoy, and we do shows for kids that adults can also enjoy. Those are kind of
Yeah.
our two wheelhouses. So
Oh, absolutely. I
yeah.
love that. And, I mean, you say screens and short attention spans, I mean, like, I think that's like the bane of teachers in the classroom right
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
is students with short attention spans or apathy towards wanting to sit there and learn and metabolize information because just they're so trained for quick hitting nonstop. I mean, what do you think the antidote for that is?
So I don't think that people have short attention spans. I've been thinking about this a lot. Because if you put anyone, kid, adult, who you think has a short attention span in front of something they're interested in, suddenly they have a long attention span,
Mm,
right? Kids
interesting.
will kids will sit through a Pixar movie like wrapped and then say, "Show it to me again," right?
That's right.
Or or if it's a show they want to watch or a discussion they want to have or an experience they want to have, and so I think that the challenge is that it's not so much that we have short attention spans, it's that the way that we've trained kids to consume information and expect information is radically different than how when I grew up or when you grew up.
Hmm.
And so I think it's more about recalibrating how we engage versus kind of blaming it on the attention span.
Oh, I love that. I mean, yeah, because people say it about adults even, like, oh, everybody has such a short attention span because of TikTok and Instagram. But then it's like, well, then how come we listen to 3 hour long form podcasts, right? Like,
Right.
how come we're able to sit there and watch a 20-minute how-to video?
Yeah.
It's like it's really about how is it presented to you.
Yeah. Well, people, I mean, you can't say we have shorter attention spans when some of the most popular television series the last 5 years have been like, hour long 70 episode dramas
Yeah,
that you just have to like
absolutely,
slog
yes.
through, right? So it's like, I don't know. I don't we think a lot about these things. I don't mean to sort of like, say maybe people do have short attention spans, but we think of it a little bit differently because our job is to really think about we actually think about attention a lot and engagement. And that's where we could like our Who Smarted episodes are 15 minutes long because it's the perfect length for a car ride, right? If we
Mhm.
thought that those episodes would be better at 30 minutes, we'd make them 30 minutes, but it's kind of the perfect length. And we
Mhm.
also think about what is the purpose of the attention we're seeking? So
Yeah, that's a
like,
great
you
question.
know,
Yes.
right. And so with Who Smarted, we're not trying to teach a kid everything there is to know about Friday the 13th or, Jupiter or the human body. I just want to get them excited about learning. Like,
Hmm.
and I want to get them thinking about things they haven't thought about before. And so we always think of like in a Who Smarted episode, if we can get people to walk away with like one or two key facts and that maybe they get inspired to think more, that's the win for us. And so we can do that in 15 minutes. We don't have to go on to 20.
Well, and that's often what I talk with teachers about is it's like, well, what's the primary purpose of this time that you
Yeah.
have with students? Is it just about them remembering the Pythagorean theorem or the
Hmm.
process of photosynthesis, or is it about deeper thinking, or is it
Hmm.
about getting excited about learning or whatever it is? Like, how is this an applicable skill that I can take away from this learning experience when maybe the Pythagorean theorem isn't relevant as it used to be? Um,
Yeah. This was my
right?
struggle. You're like describing me as a like in high school, I really struggled in math and science. And it
Yes.
was odd because I was actually really interested in math and science. Like I was
Mm,
reading books and going to the Museum of Science and like studying astronomy outside of school. And it wasn't, I had good teachers, but it was the way that the material was taught was unrelatable to me. I think I was too much a kid who was like, well, how does this algebra going to matter to me if I want to go into theater or film? And so
yes.
my brain checked out. And a lot of what drives me now is how do I make education for kids like me who actually are curious and who do want to learn and who do want to engage, but it's impossible for teachers who have like their own lives and their own kids and 30 kids in a classroom. You can't meet every kid where they are. Like it's
Yeah.
impossible. And so we just try and provide like fun entry points that are fun for all kids to like make it easier for parents to get kids engaged at home or teachers in the classroom. But yeah, I was that kid who just like yeah, Pythagorean theory in particular. I was like, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well,
I
and it's
don't
not like you said, it's not that it's not good information or it's not good content. It's often the pedagogy, like how you're actually presented it. You said something about 15-minute episodes earlier. That reminds me, I saw this research about lectures about how like the human mind cannot absorb information in one format or medium for more than 17 seconds or 17 minutes before
17
we
minutes.
start losing attention in that area. And
Mhm.
that's why it's so important to reset the brain as you're presenting information. Have you
Mhm.
heard that before? It,
So I haven't. I've heard different versions of that. I haven't heard 17 minutes. We found through talking to psychologists and just our own kind of like, I don't want to use, I'm using the word like lowercase r research.
Hmm.
Um, we find that people seem to be able to hold on to a topic for about 3 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes. Even yes.
Yeah. And
Uh-huh.
so underlying the structure of whether you're watching Brain Games or listening to Who Smarted, it's
Hmm.
sort of invisible, but we do reset the topic in some way every 2 to 3 minutes.
Yes. Well,
And
and that's what I
so
was getting at. I mean, because like how many times did you growing up have to sit through a 45-minute lecture?
too
And it's like
many.
it might
Yeah.
have been well intentioned,
Yeah.
but the fact is, after whatever that magic number is, that you have to break it up and give students an opportunity to discuss. Or
Yeah.
nowadays you have to let kids watch a video or listen to a short podcast or write down and sketch their notes or something that changes the format of the thinking experience.
Yeah. Or
And
ask the kids to present it. I mean, that's the thing. I have
mm,
a lot of friends who are teachers, like, ask the kids, say, you know what? Figure it out. Like, you come up here and do a 5 minute sketch about the, Civil War.
yeah,
You
love that.
You tell me, and then we'll talk about it. But now we're going to talk about something you did, right? We're empowering the kids to be engaged
So
and
good.
to actually feel some ownership. Um, that's the kind of stuff that I was lucky in that in high school. I had a few teachers that did that. Like my English teacher, Mr. Baxter, had us reading Joseph Conrad book
Mm,
Heart of Darkness. And this is a book that I was sort of dreading, right? And then
sure.
he's like, "Well, before we read this, we're going to watch this movie, Apocalypse Now."
Mm.
And so we watched Apocalypse Now, which was based on Hearts of Darkness. And then when we were reading Hearts of Darkness, we were like, oh my gosh, this relates. Now, I don't know if you could show Hearts of Darkness in a high school classroom anymore,
I
but
don't know about that, but yeah.
but like when I was in high school, it was fine. And so like, it was, but there are ways to do that where you're getting the kids to like um, drop their fear or resistance
Mm.
by giving them something that they're going to relate to, that you're sort of sneaking in you're sneaking the broccoli into the mac and cheese, as we like to put it.
Well, I
So
like, yeah, it's almost like a little bit of bait and switch. I mean, and that's why I love like kind of what you talk about is this entertainment is mixed with education. Like it's
yeah,
about hooking students so that they'll actually participate.
yes,
Um, and like so, like one of the things you said earlier about is students going up and presenting what they're learning or having students interact. That's something that AI can't do,
yeah,
right? Like that's something that like you can't just bypass with technology nowadays. As you know, one of the things that I talk about with teachers all the time, and I hear it all the time, is there's a lot of resistance to technology because it's
mhm,
nonstop and there's always something new and it's always threatening to change the status quo. And so like as educators, you kind of have to figure out how to keep up
yeah,
with it all. And then obviously the impact that it has on students, whether it's them academic dishonesty and cheating, or it's distraction and
right,
temptation.
right,
And so one of the big temptations of teachers is just to ignore some of these new technologies
yeah,
because they get in the way of deeper learning, which I empathize with.
mhm.
Um, but the reality is it's here, it's present.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so how do we figure out how to adapt
yeah,
and use it to our benefit and to our students' benefit?
yeah.
Is that something you can speak to?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, look, I think the dream of like the best possible use of AI at some point in the classroom is that it makes it effortless for a teacher to be able to meet each student where that student's sweet spot is
Mm,
in terms of how they learn. Because some students are experiential learners, some are visual, some are more athletic, some are more musical,
yep.
and it is impossible, to both to figure that out and then like create individualized curriculum and approaches for each kid. But if you can figure out like if an AI could figure out like a 2 or 3 minute long sort of doorway, we call it, like into a subject that is really appealing to each kid for how they learn, and
Mm,
then you've got everyone back, and now you can teach and everyone's excited. That's a great use of AI. We're not there obviously,
yeah.
but in the meanwhile, like I will say that like it's not just educators who have a resistance. Like even we have had a very like very slow adoption of AI at our company because we've seen a lot of people jump on the AI bandwagon, and you start to see the output, the creative output, and it's not good. Like it feels very similar. It feels like it lacks a human touch.
Hmm.
Uh, so we like to use it. We say like, how can we use it in a way to solve a specific problem, right? And so if you're like if you're teaching a bunch of kids about a history lesson and you do want to like engage them to come up and act it out, like that sounds like an easy thing to say, but actually there's a lot of work involved in that and thinking like, well, what are we acting out and who's doing what roles and what's the scene and da, da. Like that's something you could I would use AI for and say like I'm
Hmm.
teaching and you could do it with a class. Like we're doing a lesson on whatever it is,
Hmm.
and we want to do a 10-minute sketch. Can you just give us an outline of like what roles we need and maybe just a starting point and a couple of key points? And it could actually give you something that's like an outline for that scene. And now you could just say to the kids, okay, you're gonna play this role, you're gonna play that role, this is what we're doing. I think stuff like that, where you're using it almost like a teacher assistant,
Yes.
is very valuable. And I 100% appreciate why teachers would be resistant, because I know you guys get walloped every 5 seconds with like, here's the new test, here's the new standard, here's the new this,
Yep.
here's the new that, and it's like you're like, okay, like
Yeah,
it's
but the way I see it is like it can save you time. Like you said, I'm not having to spend all this time figuring out what student role and what groups they're in. I can have AI do that for me. And you can even input student data. You can say, hey, here's my students' reading scores, put them in groups appropriately. It's like
Mhm.
that's a task that if you really wanted engaging collaboration, a teacher would have in the past, I would have in the past sat down and spent 45 minutes of my planning period figuring out where I'm going
Yep.
to place students and how to set them up. Now AI is going to do it for me in 20 seconds. Well,
Yeah.
guess what? I just won 44 minutes to
Yeah.
actually now do something else and
Yes.
adapt. You're right. Like it's a time
No, that's
saver.
an awesome. That's what we like. We do on the Who Smarted series. We do a trusty trivia episode on Thursdays. It's like a 3-minute trivia game.
Hmm.
We've done like 500 and something episodes of Who's Smarted at this point. So rather than like we would have to go back manually and figure out like which ones haven't we done the trusty trivia, we can actually now just give it to the AI and say which episodes haven't we done trusty trivia about, and it'll say
Yeah.
like here's a bunch, and so then we could just like quickly write the episode versus the 15 minutes that we were spending like manually sorting through what we've done. So these are ways that I love using it. I'm not a fan of using it for us at least, because we're a creative company. We don't like
Hmm.
to use it for like script writing necessarily, or that kind of thing.
Yep.
But as an assistant, like you're saying, like a time saver, it's
Oh,
it's fantastic, you know.
absolutely. I mean, one of the ways, so I write a lot of videos and scripts that I do, and one of the ways I do it is I dictate it because I want it to
Mhm.
sound the way that I talk, and so I'll dictate it to Google Docs. But the dictating tool is just not all the way there yet, and so it's
Yeah.
all just over the place. Well, I'll just put it into Chat GPT and say, "Hey, just clean this up. This was
Yeah.
dictated, so I want to keep my voice, but I want it to all make sense. Do that for me."
Clean this up, please, is like my favorite GPT command. I think I tell ask clean
Wait, what
this
is
up,
it?
please. Like clean this up, please.
Yeah, clean this up, please. And
I
of
always
course,
say
you use
please.
please.
I say please because in case they do take over, I want them to know
I was always
I was
polite.
always
That's
polite.
yeah. I use a lot of nice manners as well. But I mean, it just saves me so much. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, the truth is, I could have sat down and just cleaned it all up myself. I have the skill to do that, or I could have paid somebody to do that for me.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, but this will do it for me anyway. And now I've just bought myself 20 extra minutes to put it into more creative
Yeah.
tasks that only I can do, not
Yeah.
AI.
Exactly. That's where we love using it, is where can it free up time for us to do what we're really good at. So we're leveraging it that way. In fact, I actually know some educators. I have educator friends who, have been teaching a certain class for, 10 or 15 years, and now new standards come out or new requirements for the curriculum, and they'll take their existing curriculum and they'll put it into the AI and say, I need to add in these new standards and these are no longer relevant, and the GPT can actually output for you your new lesson plan, right?
Wow. Yes.
So it's still your stuff, but it's like you're saving, instead of like spending hours like trying to figure it out,
Yeah.
like this thing can do this like kind of uh more like data activity so much
Hmm.
faster than we can. So that's a wonderful use of it.
Now, if you were a brand new teacher and you didn't necessarily know what a strong lesson plan looks like, or in the same way, if you're brand new to writing and you don't know what good writing looks like, it would be very easy to just trust that AI spit out a good lesson plan or it spit out a good script or a good writing piece. And so, like for me, I get a little nervous about like I'll give this example. My son's 10 years old and he loves to write. It's like his favorite thing in the world. We don't really do a whole lot of screens in our house. And so I've got him like tricked to think that like screen time is like time on the word processor. He's like,
That's
Dad, can I
that's
can
amazing.
I have you screen time? I'm like, all right, you can write for 50 minutes
I
and then you need to go out and play.
that is That's amazing. Ride
It's
that
the
train as
best.
long as you can, sir.
Yeah. But he's seen what Chat GPT can do a little bit. And he's seen like the wonder of it and then how it'll write rap music and poetry and all this. And I will not let them use it because I'm like, I need you to develop your own writer's voice before you let this thing help you the way that it helps me.
Yeah.
Because I don't want you to learn bad lessons, but also you don't necessarily know what your writing should sound like yet. So you need to learn that and figure that out, and then we'll introduce it.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, whether it's I know there's a big question, but like whether it's educators or people who you work with and people that work for you, is there yeah, I don't. How do you respond? I don't. I guess I don't really have the question other than what do you do with that? Like, do you feel like we should have breaks on using AI until we've mastered a certain area, or do you think it's like, well, it's here, so use it as much as you can? Does that make sense
Yeah,
at all?
I don't think I can weigh in generally on that because I think there's a lot of people that don't love to write or aren't good at writing for
Mm-hmm.
whom GPT, or the AI can like basically, in the same sense, like there are things that I'm not good at in the
Mm.
world that I might use a machine to do or something someone else
Yeah.
could do without a machine. I do think it's valuable for that, especially for like business writing or just trying if you're trying to convey an idea. I think when it comes to creative writing and art and making music and all the things that really come from like sort of the human soul, if we want to call it
Oh,
that, like
sure.
what your son is doing, like learning to write and find his voice, I would stay away from it for that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's predictive, right? It's not a create it's like in the lowercase c version of it, it is a predictive system, not a creative system. And
Yes.
that's why it's so good at data. That's why it's so good at creating things that have a format, because it can look at all of those things that have come before it, at a depth and breadth that we cannot, and then say, okay, here's the best sort of average. If you think of what it's doing, it's actually giving you the best case average of everything that it
Yes.
can find related, right? Best case average is not what I'm looking for creative work, for my
Yeah.
creative work. But I don't want to say like for a marketing agency that's churning out Google ads or something like
Yep.
that, sure, use it, whatever. I don't like, I'm not going to argue.
Yeah,
But
it
for
makes sense
us,
why
it's
you'd use it.
yeah,
But like the truth is, it is getting better at some of that creative work, or it's just getting to pull from more and more of the best average to where like what it's putting out is starting to look a little bit more indiscernible than it used to, even just a couple of years. But the fact is, at least as a consumer, we wouldn't really listen to the podcast if we knew that it was an AI generated voice
yeah,
and an AI generated script. It's like, well, that's just there's a disconnect there. And,
right.
and so
But
as a teacher,
do you
yeah.
think that's generational? Because like, I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. I wonder the same question.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Like
is
kid,
it
like
generational?
I don't know.
Absolutely.
Kids who are going to be, 20 in 10 years might be like, who cares? Like it's, it doesn't matter. Like I don't know. But
But
yeah,
like I feel like AI generated images, like even if it's a beautiful piece of artwork, if I know a human didn't sit there and paint it, that matters to me.
yeah,
Um,
me too. Me too.
but I
I
don't
think
know.
it's fascinating. To me, I'm looking at that stuff more like, wow, that's amazing that a computer could do that. And I will say I've seen some AI art that's like stuff that's someone obviously had a thought of like, I want to create this image or
Yep.
this video that could not literally be done in reality, and so they're able to do it. That stuff I'm more appreciative of
Yeah.
than just like, hey, here's some, clever thing I did. Like it's like, okay, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and this, I mean, to bring it back to teaching, like I've sat down with teachers and we've designed some amazing projects, like really cool learning units using AI. You know what I mean? Like we'll put in like these big prompts about the learning standards and what you want your students to get out of it and the time frame that you have to work with it, and it will spit out some of the coolest project ideas ever. And so
Uh-huh.
a critic might say, "Well, that's cheating. You should have sat down with a collaborative team and came up with that yourself." It's like, okay, well, we didn't. And now I've got this unbelievable kick ass project for my students to do. And now I can lead it.
Right,
And now, since I didn't have to spend 2 months designing this thing and I now have it, I can spend more time with students.
right.
I can spend more human time and I can give them good feedback. And, in the same way, because AI graded my students' work for me using inputs that I gave it, now I'm not spending all this time grading and I'm spending more time working with kids one on one or helping
Yeah.
them create, right? So it's like, oh,
Yeah.
there's a benefit there, but you just have to know how to do it.
That's what where I take a little issue with people who are like really opposed to AI. They're like, well,
Mm,
it's taking this way. So it's like, well, but you always have to look at the other side, which is like, what is it enabling, right? And so if you're using AI to enable you to do more of what you're good at as a human, stuff that AI can't do, that's a great use of it. I mean, we're thinking of creating curriculum for teachers and homeschool parents to use with Who Smarted,
Mm,
and we get asked that all the time. Like, can you create like lessons and stuff?
yeah,
I'm like, we can, but when you start to think about creating, paying like we've paid STEM consultants before to create curriculum on some of our shows, but like 10 episodes or something, it was
yep,
very expensive. And I'm like, okay, we started getting quotes to create curriculum for 500 episodes, and we're getting into like tens and tens of thousands of dollars, which we
yeah,
don't have. We're a small educational podcast. And then someone was like, well, we should try AI. And we said, okay, we want to align with these grades, these common core standards. We fed it a couple of our scripts, and it was
transcript.
like a minute later we had like curriculum for an episode. And I was like, okay, that is a great use, because we it's not that we're not hiring people. We never would have spent that money in the first place, because there's no, it's not a business for us. It's something we want to
Yeah,
provide as a service, as something to the community. And it's like, oh, if we can do that and give teachers and homeschool parents a way to actually integrate these episodes into their classroom, that improves the impact of the show. And so that's a case where I'm like happy to use AI, you
yeah.
know?
I mean, it's a miracle sometimes. Like what you see it can do, you're like, man, this is really, really helpful. But also, like going back to it, we don't want to lose the humanity that comes with learning. We don't want to lose the curiosity and creativity. And that does worry me a little bit. Like, because there's a lot of people. I mean, I gave a demonstration on AI to a group of teachers this last year, and I showed all that it can do, and I had it write the causes of the Industrial Revolution in the voice of Shakespeare and Eminem, and they were all like, "Whoa!" Because they haven't heard of it yet. And I said, "Yep, this is what it can do." And one of the teachers said, "Well, nobody tell my students about this."
Yeah,
I was
good
like,
luck.
"Oh, yeah, good." I was like, "Oh, is that what you think? You don't think they're already using it?
Yeah.
How cute." It's like, no, they're already using it. Like it's
Yeah.
and I said every single teacher in here, if you're teaching secondary, has had a student cheat in their class using
For sure.
ChatGPT.
For sure.
Like it's out there. Um, and so I guess one of the things as educators is it's how do we preserve creativity? How do we preserve strong writing? How do we preserve math critical thinking and problem solving skills that come in math class, knowing that there's a technology that can do a lot of this work for
Yeah.
you?
Honestly, like I think the only way you can kind of stay on top of that is make the kids do stuff in class in front of you.
Yep.
That's it. I mean, they got it. Like it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
everyone has 20 minutes to write a two-page essay on whatever it is, or
Mm-hmm.
okay, we're gonna throw some problems on the board. But again, like if you don't want to hear groans and you want the kids to be excited, you got to figure out a way to contextualize that and either make it a game or a contest, or it's about something that's really interesting to them, something that's happened in the school, some like recent event, something that they're going to be like excited about. And because if it's just like, all right, I'm just checking to make sure everybody's not cheat, like, no, you're taking the fun out of learning, and it's gonna make it less fun for them to think about learning in your class and whatever you're teaching.
Yeah, which has always been true, right? It's always been important to give meaning to what you're teaching. Like we've always wanted purpose. Humans,
Yes.
there's loads of research that shows that when people know why there's a reason for doing something hard, they do it so much better,
Mhm.
right? Like purpose helps us develop emotionally and socially and cognitively. And so being able to give that purpose, but then also what you do so well with your podcast and your team is entertaining. Like, right? Like, how do we create something that's fun about this, whether it's
Yeah.
gamifying, whether it's being silly, whether it's relevance, like you said, like that is what leads to deeper
Yeah.
learning.
We did a great experiment on brain games around this. Like, well, so
Hmm.
there was some research that shows if you walk into a line of people like waiting to use, say, a copy machine at a copy center. I mean, that no one does that anymore, but this was an old research,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
People are waiting in line and you're like, excuse me, can I go in front of you? Almost everybody says no, right? Everyone's like, no, I've been waiting in line, get in line like me.
yeah.
If you go and you say, excuse me, can I get in front of you because I have to pick up my son in an hour? Excuse me, can I get in front of you because I have a job interview in 30 minutes? If you give a because, you can even just say, can I get in front of you because I'm running late? You can be that vague. Suddenly, like there's like 75 or 80% of people will let you
Oh,
get in front because you've given a reason. And it's wild. We did this experiment in Vegas where we had one person stand next to a velvet rope in the middle of Fremont Street, no sign. And then someone else,
okay.
and we're like, let's see what happens. Someone else comes up to him, and is like, what are you waiting for? He's like, we told him to say, I don't know. They said something's going to happen.
Yep.
So he said, I don't know. They said something's gonna happen. So
Yep.
that person goes, oh, cool, I'll get in line. And it keeps going. So we had like a line of like 200 people.
What? That's so good.
It was wild. And
And there was
then
nothing.
there was nothing, but what we did just to see how far we could push it was we then put on like a song and had this guy start a conga line, and the
Uh-huh.
entire line of people just like start conging. Now, granted, we're in Las Vegas, so to be
Yes.
fair, but it was
Oh,
wild. We
that's
were like, it just worked. Like people, you just have to give people a tiny whiff of reason. Our brains love it, and we will engage, and we will stick around. And that's sort of the core, like as complex as everything we do is, at the core of it is like we're always just trying to give you like just a reason to lean in and a reason to engage, and it can be very flimsy. Our
yes.
brains don't need a whole scaffolding. They just need like a hey, because blank, and we'll stick around.
Oh, that's such a good word. I love that because it's like, yeah, on the surface, I might not know. I'm not planning on being an engineer. Why do I need to know the Pythagorean theorem?
Mhm,
But if a teacher can say, hey, if you can figure this out, your brain is going to be able to do this, or you're
mhm.
going to be able to think in a different way. Or I'm sure there's lots of math teachers who could answer that way better, but by giving a little bit of relevancy and justification,
I would say like, hey, you ever wonder why this building doesn't fall down on us while we're sitting here?
here we go.
Here,
So
let's
good.
let's look at this. I'm like, okay, now I want to know. Now I care.
Now I can pay attention to that a
Yeah,
little bit more.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Well, I want to ask you one more question. If there's one lesson you've learned about learning and creativity from your work that you would want educators and parents who are listening to this to take away, what would it be?
Always start anything you're doing with relatability,
Mm.
right? Just always make it relatable. Make it like meet your learner where they are, not where you wish they were.
Oh, that's so good.
I just made that up. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna make a meme out of it later,
Please do. Yeah.
and I'll
Please
tag your name. No, I mean that is so good.
do. I
Yeah.
mean, that is it. That's what we do. Like, yeah, like meet people where they are, not where you wish they were, because that then you're talking their language, you're making it relatable, and you're meeting them where their curiosity lives. That's it.
Yes, absolutely. And as we talk about educating kids, it's going down to their level, right? Like it's and that's what you do so well is like there's a sophistication to your podcast, but also a silliness and a childlikeness to it. And it's blending that together. And in my experience, that's what really great educators do as well. It's like, listen, we're learning serious, important stuff, but also we're having fun because this
Right.
is childhood, right? We're
Yeah.
learning. What could be
Yeah.
greater than that?
Yeah.
So,
Nothing. I love it.
yeah, so good. Jerry, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I love this.
Thank you. This was awesome. What a fun conversation.
All right. Well, everybody, you should check out Who Smarted. It's a great podcast. Is the curriculum out now, or is that something that's kind of
No,
in
we're
development?
working on it. Working on
Okay.
it later this year.
I
Yeah.
love that. Well, I'm guessing up until you get that out, somebody could also just say, hey, I listen to this podcast. Give me some good questions to ask my students. And AI could churn that out for you.
Literally, yeah. You could make the curriculum yourself. Feel free.
Well, there
Maybe
you go.
send it to me if you do.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, thanks so much, Jerry. Check out Who Smarted, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Epic Classroom Podcast. My name's Trevor Muir, and I will talk to you next time.